With that, I want to introduce our first speaker. It's going to be Lena Kangura. She is a air pollution specialist in CARB's quality assurance section. You probably recognize her as one of the lovely auditors that come out to your stations. She's going to be talking to you guys about technical systems audits this morning. So please welcome Lena.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you guys all make it in. I was worried that we might lose people to heat stroke or heat exhaustion, so I'm excited that everyone's here. All right, the clicker is here. Hi, good morning. My name is Lena Kangura. I work in the quality assurance section at the Air Resources Board, and I am going to talk to you a little bit about technical system audits. And I'm going to make you feel the love so you guys are nice to us when we show up. So just so you know, a little history about TSAs. We've been doing them for about 6 or 7 years, but about 2 or 3 years ago, we revamped our program to make it more similar to EPA's program. It's now a 3-man team that consists of myself, Don Hammond, you can raise your hand, and Amen Baines. So you can ask them questions if you have any. So we'll just get right into it. Fly away. So some of the things that we're going to discuss, a little overview. I'll just kind of talk about what is a TSA, what's the purpose, why we conduct them. A lot of you have gone through the TSA process, so the first 2 sections will be relatively quick. I'll also discuss the process of the TSA, and then we'll kind of focus on common findings. These are findings that all of the districts have received, as well as CARB, so we've received these findings as well. First up, why do we do them? Not to annoy you, they are federally required. I've included the link. It's a lot of language, a lot of text. I just want you to pay attention to the 6-year requirements, and then the reference to reference 10. So what they're talking about is CFR requires that all of the PQAOs in California, and there's 4, they receive TSAs from EPA on a 3-year cycle. All those PQAOs which have local districts, which it's CARB exclusively, the local districts receive an audit from CARB on a 1- and 6-year cycle. Earlier, I made reference to reference 10. That's everybody's favorite, the QA handbook. If you're not familiar with this, remedial QA is down the hall. We can help you out. What does it say? Essentially, it just says that you need to make an on-site review and assessment, and you want to check compliance with established regulations governing the collection, analysis, validation, and reporting of ambient air data. So we're looking from cradle to grave. The data when it's produced, when it's reviewed, when it's uploaded, the post-review process, are you reviewing your AMP reports, the whole process. So really quickly, I'm going to go over the 6 parts of the TSA. Like I said, a lot of you have already been part of the TSA. So the next couple slides are dense with information, but I did try to set up the slides so whenever you pull the short straw and it's your time, that you can refer back to this presentation and hopefully it'll be beneficial to you. First up is planning. So we're looking at network design, we're looking at representativeness, how your sites are set up. We've heard a lot about monitoring, minimum monitoring requirements. We also independently verify those. And also we're looking at resources from the staff and for equipment. Also, we do field operations, so it's a little different than a regular QA visit. We're actually looking if the instruments are configured according to FEM and FRM requirements, so we're going through the diagnostics of the actual instrument. We're looking at sampling procedures, also siting, and if the siting is properly done, also maintenance and any safety concerns that might be highlighted when we visit the site. Next up is laboratory operations. There are 7 labs in the state of California, 1 at all of the 4 PQAOs, and then there are 3 district-run labs. Great Basin and Lake County both run PM10 and 2.5 labs, and Sac Metro does a PM10 only lab. During these visits, or during the TSA, We look at a lot of the same things. We're looking at documentation. Is your equipment adequate for your needs? We're looking at the capabilities of your network and your staff. Also, of course, we're looking at sample handling, storage, chain of custody. Does it paint a good picture? Does it have enough information on your chain of custody to provide answers when we ask questions, 2, 3 years later? QA, again, it's different from what you might expect from a regular audit. It is more about documentation. So do you have a QMP and a QAP? Is there a level of independence if the district's doing their own calibrations? Is there independent standards, independent staff, if available? QC checks, SOPs, a lot of this stuff you guys already know. Are you doing them at the correct frequency? We also look at AQDAs and CANs. This is when, when you took 6 months to reply to the AQDA, we might ask you what the reason was or ask for a little more justification as to why. I saw one laugh and one guilty laugh. Data management. So this I'll talk about in depth a little bit on in the later on in the presentation. This is one of the common findings that I discussed. We're looking about your data acquisition system. There's tons of vendors next door, so we're looking if it suits your needs. Is it adequate? Is your data backed up? What frequency? Is there an independent server so we can make sure that we don't ever lose that data? And then, of course, is your process documented? Are you reviewing the AMP reports at the end of the year? Next up is reporting. So if you've collected the data, you've analyzed the data, you peer reviewed it, you're going to upload the data to AQS. Is it done in a timely manner? Are you guys using the correct codes or null codes, metadata? And of course, there's the annual certification that needs to happen. Is it happening on a timely schedule? Are we meeting our deadlines? So that was really quick. What to expect? It can be broken into a 3-step process. There is the pre-audit activities is where we start, and it starts off with a fairly lofty questionnaire that we borrowed from EPA and now use as well. It's a good 20 to 30 pages, so you do want to allot yourself some time to kind of get involved in it and stay there and kind of discuss your entire network. It'll take you at least a good 3 to 5 days, I would say. We also request all of your SOPs, your documents, your QAPs, your QMPs, any additional documentation you have, we'll review before we get to the site. And then we have data review. So we are looking at the last 3 years worth of data when we come for a TSA. So these are just some of the AMP reports that we at CARB and there's other agencies that assist us review when we're looking at the last 3 years of your data. I know some of these might be new, but they're helpful. So this should look familiar to everyone. This is a AMP 350 report, and as we can see, we got maybe 7 to 9 days right there in the beginning of the month where we had some kind of issue. So what we're looking at is through your null codes, through the qualifier codes, can we kind of paint a story? So first it starts off that they were doing a precision check, and then it goes immediately into instrument malfunction. So when I show up 3 years later, you're going to have to look through your logbooks and tell me what happened on September 17, 2016 on this day. That's why we're always nailing home the documentation and the logbooks and all this kind of stuff. Here toward the end, it looks like they did a QC check, it failed, then they did another precision check, and it worked. I might ask if it failed the initial precision check, maybe it warranted a calibration and not just a precision check. How did you verify that this instrument is indeed working well? You can't tell, but like throughout this 7-day period, I think they used 6 or 7 different qualifier codes. So it might be a good thing where they're being really descriptive and really informative, and it might be where the operator is kind of uncertain of what to use, and there might be some further discussions. Sorry. So yeah, so I'll ask about the maintenance, I'll ask about what the malfunction was, and essentially just ask you to paint a story from your documentation that you have. So next up is, We show up. We do our on-site assessment. So depending on the size of the district, we do between 3 to 5 days on-site. We review the file area, your repair shop. Do you have adequate supplies to quickly resolve, smaller, more common problems? How do you address larger problems? How are they documented in your logbooks? How are you coding the data as well? We do field site assessments. Depending on the size of the district, we won't go to every single site. That might be difficult, but we'll definitely go to sites that we've identified as maybe problematic. We've seen like large gaps in the data. We also want to make sure that we go to a site for each operator in the district. That way we can kind of talk to all the district staff, and we'll ask them the same questions. They're very open-ended, like walk us through your QC process, walk us through your calibration process. And we just want to make sure that what's actually being done is matching what's documented, and there's consistency among the operators, that they're all doing the same thing, which is important. And then finally, before we leave, either the morning before we leave or the late afternoon before we leave, we will give you our preliminary findings. At ARB, we try to be really open, really transparent. Even if we think that it might be a finding or it might be downgraded to a recommendation, we definitely want to convey that information to you so there's no surprises when we do the final report. And then, post-assessment. So we've reviewed all of your documentation. We come back to the site. We internally will discuss what we have found. There are times that in our notes, so we have conflicting information, so we might ask for additional information or clarification via email or phone calls. And then we will compose our findings. These are similar to EPA's findings, the way that it's set up. It's a description of the finding. There's references to guidance and CFR where the finding would reference. And then ultimately there's a suggestion, and it is a suggestion to resolve the finding. You will work with your liaison to close out your findings in the end. And then finally, 4 or 5 or 6 months later, we get the final report out to you. We do give you 30 days for comment. So you're allowed to review the report, let us know if there's any inconsistencies, inaccuracies, or things that you just blatantly disagree with. And we can discuss it, and then the final report is released to the district. These are private. They're shared between the district and ARB. They're not given out to people. Okay, common findings. The biggest one, shocker, documentation. We discuss it endlessly, and the only reason is because it continues to be a finding. It continues to be an issue that we see repetitively at districts. So missing or outdated documentation, that's kind of in reference to SOPs and QAPs. So just so you know, QMPs are required, to have them, and to be updated on a 5-year schedule. The QAPs, again, are to be updated every 5 years. And then SOPs for all your samplers, and they need to be updated once every 3 years. How do you avoid this finding? No need to reinvent the wheel. You can use CARB's documents and adjust them to your own. So we have, you can use our documents as a template and then modify them so they're specific to your district. You'll submit those to your liaisons. They'll review and approve them and get them back to you. Next up is logbooks. So missing information in logbooks is very common. Calibration information is missing. Information regarding QC checks and maintenance is not documented. So it's okay if you have independent calibration sheets and QC sheets, but in your bound logbook, you need to make chronological notes about when they were conducted. You would also maybe want to include the results of that finding, and then you can reference, if you need additional information, you can see QC sheets or cal sheets. But you definitely want to have it in your bound notebook as well. Like I was saying, things like who was present at the site, serial numbers, descriptions of what happened, and then most importantly, how the data was impacted and what actions were taking place. More about logbooks. This was, no, I was going to make a joke about a district. Okay. These are some logbooks. Yeah, more about how you can reference your cal sheets in your documentation, but it does need to be in the logbook. You definitely want to make sure you include serial numbers of problematic instruments, because more than likely that instrument is going to travel around. You're going to pull it. It might go to the lab. It might go to the vendor. It might go to CARB. So you need a way to track that. And of course, the serial number is the best way to do that. And then, again, we want all your notes to be in chronological order in a central logbook, and you want to make these entries at the time that the action was performed. Last up is data management. So this is data review. So this is like one of the most common findings that we found, like I said. We go to districts, there are processes in place. You have, data review, peer review, managerial review, but more often than not, it's not formally documented in an SOP. So everybody's doing the actions, but we don't have any documentation of it. And then when it comes to correct codes, we're looking for more consistency. So among the operators, are you guys all using the same code for a certain action? That way you have, it's easy to identify. Okay, just in summary, TSAs are a 3-step process. It starts with the questionnaire, there is an on-site visit, and then ultimately the follow-up and final report will come about 5 or 6 months later. And then major findings is documentation, the big ones like SOPs, QMPs, QAPs. Again, this was a finding on ARB as well. We are hustling hard to resolve this finding, so take advantage of that and use our work as your template, and it'll lighten your load a little bit. And then lastly is data management. Just formalize your process in an SOP and make sure everybody's on the same page. So do you have any questions? I know it's early for this. Great, I can take my blazer off. Thank you very much. Oh.